What up, Cooks? It's your boy, The Hater, and I wanted to do this video because I was talking to a friend of mine about great WWE storylines, and inevitably, he starts talking about the Bloodline storyline. And I'm here to tell all of you that at best, the Bloodline storyline was, and I suppose is, mid. All right? It is a mid-level storyline. It's nothing to write home about. Let me take you back to 1998 or 1999 or somewhere around that time. I was a little kid. I was in 4th, maybe 5th grade. And one of the people that got me into wrestling was the two sons of a family friend, right? Family friends. Great guys. They're a little older than me. One of them is like a year and a half older. The other one's like 4 years older. The one who's like 4 years older was like a huge fan of Shawn Michaels, right? And during this time, Shawn Michaels wasn't on TV. He comes back, right? Unexpected. I'm watching Raw, and I call him immediately. I'm like, dude, you can imagine the hater as a 4th grader. Dude, Shawn Michaels is back. And he's like, I know, I'm watching, right? Then I went to school the next day, and everyone was talking about Shawn Michaels coming back. I don't even remember the storyline. It was probably a throwaway one-off at this time, right? But the truth is that people cared. People would literally stop what they're doing. They would stop enjoying the thing that they were enjoying, and they would call their friends to tell about them. Now, I know the times were different. We didn't have Twitter, right? We didn't really have internet, and even if we did, nobody was like on the internet trying to see what was going on, right? That's how you found things out back then. Cucks, you called each other. But the reason I bring this up is because it was in the mainstream. People would talk about it. And I was thinking, it's very strange that the ratings of WWE and, of course, of AEW has had, like, I think the best ratings they had was their first episode, and it's literally been downhill the entire time, basically. I mean, they've had, obviously, a boost here and there, but it's generally been a downhill battle for them. Right now, with that being said, when was the last time that even you yourself as a wrestling fan, you talked to someone that isn't a wrestling fan or maybe is a lapsed wrestling fan or anything like that, right? In a random setting like school or perhaps you're at the mall. I don't know what you guys do nowadays, right? Not in the wrestling forums, but in the real world, right? And someone said, wow, the Bloodline is a great storyline. The last time this may have happened, in my opinion, would be around the also overrated CM Punk storyline, you know, the pipe bomb and all that stuff, right? But at least that one was, I hate to say it because I don't like giving Punk credit, but that was a legitimate wrestling storyline, right? That's what wrestling storylines are about. It's really cool things happening, most of which either break kayfabe or attempt to break kayfabe. The entire premise around the Attitude Era, people don't understand this because they're not well read, you know what I'm saying? They don't know how to analyze plots. The entire premise of the Attitude Era literally was kayfabe city, right? And the breaking of kayfabe, right? The main character of the Attitude Era, for those that understand, was obviously Vince McMahon. The show centered around him and his motivations, right? If you were to tell that story, Vince McMahon would be at the center. He'd be the bad guy, but he would be at the center, right? It was him versus Triple H. Then it was him versus The Rock. Before that, it was him versus Stone Cold, right? Him versus Mankind. Every main eventer, even Undertaker, had to go through Vince McMahon one way or another. Those were the faces. Or sometimes they were the heels and they were aligned with him. Other ones like Kane, you know, people of that stature were generally aligned with Vince McMahon, right? Before they turned face. And that's pretty much what the main event scene was. It was people that were either against or with Vince McMahon, right? Now, you might be thinking to yourself, how is this relevant? Well, I'll tell you how. That is the breaking of kayfabe. In kayfabe, Vince McMahon is the owner of the business known as WWE, right? But he's also a character, the evil boss character, right? So when Stone Cold beats up the evil boss character, you can almost think of it as if Spider-Man punched Stan Lee, right? They're beating the creator of the show. It's like almost like a meta commentary. I'm not trying to make it sound too deep, but that's the idea. So that night when Shawn Michaels came back, the entire point was like, Vince, I'm back and I'm the commissioner, right? He was subverting the expectations of the audience by essentially playing up to the idea that the show is not going to go the way Vince planned, right? In this case, Vince is also the narrator, right? He's the director as well of the show, right? So the logic is the show is going to go down exactly how Vince wants it to go. But because Vince is a character, right? The show can then take on another dimension, right? Of people going against the narrator, going against the director. You know what I mean? This is a very common trope, but one that seldom is used in wrestling anymore, right? So for that reason, if you were to compare literally every storyline that involved Vince McMahon as the boss, and there are dozens, right? You compare that to the Bloodline, nothing of that sort is happening, right? It's literally just a faction falling apart. So I don't understand why the Bloodline is considered this great storyline, but I don't know, the falling apart of, I mean, I hate to say it, of Retribution is not considered a great storyline. I mean, Retribution is a bad example because they're just complete garbage. But you see my point, right? Why is the Bloodline storyline better than what happened to Evolution, considering it's the same exact thing? In my opinion, it's much worse because everyone involved is worse than everyone involved, right? Except for maybe Roman Reigns. You can argue he's better than you can argue he's better than all of them. But, you know, certainly as a leader, the difference between Roman Reigns and Jey Uso is much higher than Triple H and Randy Orton, right? Who would go on to be a legend on his own right. So why is it that the Bloodline falling apart is a great storyline, but Evolution is not? And I know you're thinking, you're like, oh, maybe during Evolution there was other good storylines. Not really, motherfucks. Not really. And even if there were, it doesn't really matter, right? Even if there were better storylines, right? Nobody said that Evolution was a good storyline. That wasn't even up like for debate or consideration, right? It was just, oh, Evolution's falling apart. We all knew it would happen, right? That was the consensus essentially, right? That should be the consensus with the Bloodline too. It's like as soon as it started, I'm like, all right, eventually this is all going to fall apart with everyone turning on Roman, right? Beyond that, it's not a good storyline. It's just Roman Reigns beating up his lesser family members, right? Like, everybody knows that Roman Reigns is obviously the main character of the entire family, and certainly he's the best wrestler that has come out of that family in terms of, like, presentation and everything, right? And in terms of booking. So it's like, who actually thought that Jey Uso had a chance, right? Nobody who understands wrestling, that's for sure, right? There's always a small chance, right? Like every match can end in like Roman Reigns breaks his neck and Jey Uso's, you make him the champion because everyone else died, right? That can happen too. But generally speaking, it was a safe bet. And to me, that makes it a bad storyline, right? A good storyline might be the Stone Cold and The Rock saga, right? Where Vince McMahon kept trying to interject himself and they would just push him away because they're both faces, right? Until it was revealed that Stone Cold, like the biggest face at the time and maybe the biggest face of all time at that point, right? Turns heel, right? Second only to Hulk Hogan turning heel, turns heel and aligns with his mortal enemy, Vince McMahon, right? Now, think about what happened there. That's a great storyline because, number one, you don't see it coming, right? That's the number one thing about storylines in wrestling. That's the element of surprise that wrestling has over other shows and other media that are predictable, right? That happened, number one. Two, the character work was incredible, right? Because you had The Rock, you had Stone Cold, and you had Vince McMahon, three of the best ever, right? Three, there were no jobbers involved in the storyline at all. You didn't have Solo Sikoa there just being there. You didn't have Jey and Jimmy Uso. And you didn't have the overrated Paul Heyman, right? So in my opinion, the Bloodline storyline is completely overrated and it is a mid-level storyline, right? I don't even think it's fair to say that it's good for today's standards. Now, you can make that argument because there's no actual storylines today, but let's be real. There's nothing new, right? There's nothing unpredictable. There's nothing interesting, right? It literally is, when are they going to have enough of Roman Reigns? That's the entire point of the Bloodline, right? As soon as it starts, it's like they're going to be friends, then they're not going to be friends, and then one day they're going to be friends again, right? Why wasn't the Shield breaking up considered this epic storyline, right? Maybe it's the slow burn. But it wasn't a slow burn, right? From the beginning, Jey Uso was defiant. Then he stopped being defiant, and then he became defiant again, right? You could literally do this forever, and it would have no further impact or no lessening of the impact, right? So, in my opinion, and here's the thing. Wrestling ratings, as I said earlier in this video, wrestling ratings keep going down decade by decade, right? But it's not inconceivable that the ratings could go back up, right? It's not inconceivable that I could pick up the phone and call that same friend of mine, who I still know today, right? And tell him, bro, something crazy's happening. Shawn Michaels' son is beating up Triple H's son, whatever the case may be, right? The point is, it's still possible to have a good storyline that boosts the ratings up. At the end of the day, the ultimate metric of interest is ratings, right? In terms of becoming a money-making enterprise, WWE is better than it's always been, right? This does not mean that the things that we are watching are good, right? You can look at the NFL, right? The best game in NFL history, in my opinion, Patriots versus Falcons at the Super Bowl. But it's a real sport, so nobody can predict what's going to happen. If the NFL has a boring, low-scoring season, let's say, with nothing exciting, it's still going to do great numbers because it's unexpected. Wrestling doesn't have that luxury. Wrestling will only do numbers if the fans are engaged, right? If the fans are given what is interesting, not what they want. There is a big distinction between what fans want and what fans deserve and what we need to get, right? A lot of times, as we've seen, the fans are incredibly dumb, right? And the things that they want today, they don't want tomorrow. And as a result, everything goes down the drain. And with that being said, take care of yourselves, guys.